In this video we'll talk about the Mojang studio, because many people believe that the developers are to blame for all the troubles of the game, even in the store on Bedrock. Here we'll analyze the most hackney topics related to the developers. For example, why do some items get transferred? It will be difficult to explain in general about all items, so I will explain for each one, because you can count them on your fingers. Bugs. They're moved because the developers of Bedrock didn't know how to implement them. It didn't work because it was unclear what movements on the touch screen you can open the bag, or move it to another part of the inventory. It's the team created by Microsoft that is in the failure, not Mojang. For those who didn't know, the team created by Microsoft in most cases doesn't come up with ideas, but integrates them from Java to Bedrock. Mojang Java has nothing to do with them. Horns. Initially, Henrik Nybert couldn't give them normal functionality, but fortunately in 1.19 they are already ready. It's a bit and not all of them. Copper 1 were removed due to inconsistency with the developers' design goals. What does this mean? It's unclear. I'll just say that we should get used to the fact that some things are cut out in snapshots. This isn't a release and something always changes. Even during its release, Henrik said that it wasn't a fact that they would be added, and they could change in the future. Archaeology was cut because it had much more gritty potential, and the developers wanted to make it much more interesting. Warden was moved to 1.19 for the same reason, and the result is visible. We were given a whole huge structure and a lot of unique loot. Fireflies weren't added in 1.19 because they're poisonous to frogs. Accordingly, they cannot add this functionality. Some noticed contradictions in this explain and decided that the developers were lazy, but now I'll explain everything. The developers don't want animals that exist in the real world to be harmed by the player. For this reason, crocodiles, tigers, and other mobs won't be added, which the player can only hit. Wolves that can feed bones were added when these principles didn't exist. But I'll remind you that it is wolves that can eat bones, so there are no contradictions here. The fact that they don't want to add fireflies because they're useless also seemed crazy to people, since there are foxes, pandas, bears, and the other mobs without any loot or anything like that. But their meaning is different. I recently realized that they were added to make the world alive. The same fox has a day routine. It can sleep, hunt, carry objects, and its whole meaning is precisely that. Watching this, you understand that the world isn't just empty. The frog doesn't have side jokes, since its meaning is precisely to get blocks, and all its mechanics speak about this. The firefly is simply useless from the world at all, and because of this the developers didn't want to waste the time updating it, and they don't want to stretch 1.19 because of them. Unfortunately, when they were added, almost all the functions made for them were removed. Now it's a regular particle like the same azalea. I thought initially each pixel was a separate mob. Here, as I believe, the drop system that the bosses from Microsoft came up with is entirely to blame. The update needed popularity and they decided to cause it in such a mean way. I'm sure Mojang themselves would like better user than just ambient. If you look at it this way, the list of detained items isn't that huge. Almost everything I listed was added on a much larger scale than promised. So if something is postponed, it isn't necessarily bad. The next thing we'll talk about is the problem with versions starting with 1.17. I explained the reason for all the postponements, with the exception of generation, which the developers completely changed and improved in 6 months. I think it was clear to everyone anyway. The only interesting thing is that instead of moving the update, they divided it up and first added items and then an adequate way to get it. This is a strange decision, and the reason for all this is that Mojang promised to roll out 2 updates a year. This was also invented by Microsoft, since it is never convenient for developers to meet such a tight deadline and make a quality update at the same time. It is more convenient here for Microsoft because an update always created excitement among players, and accordingly the more updates, the more often people will buy the game and donate to it. In principle, this explains why the developers didn't update more biomes in 1.19 and why caves and cliffs weren't moved but divided. Also, what I've been thinking about lately is that the same mine cones are also an event from Microsoft. Look at the previous broadcasts. Their advertising takes up almost all the airtime. It's not hard to guess, since the developers certainly don't allocate funds for the broadcast from their own pockets. Accordingly, if Microsoft pays for all these minecons, then it's up to Microsoft to decide when the broadcast will take place. Therefore, on the last day of development, they showed us a very small update and continued to make 1.81 as if nothing had happened. Minecon was completely out of the place at that time, and the developers had minimal time to prepare for 1.19. But again, the company that owns it and the most brilliant marketers don't care. Information has also come to light that Microsoft representatives are present at meetings where the fate of the game is decided. When developers offer ideas, these people can easily cancel everything, because it is not for sale. For the same reason, developers cannot update everything they once transferred at once. Naturally, the information is not on the surface. A former Mojang employee said this on Twitter in response to some guy. I don't think there is any point in her lying. It is precisely recently that these thoughts have a reason that Mojang is turning into the Ubisoft, because they deleted fireflies. Let's just compare. Ubisoft games are steadily declining in quality. Almost all the people important for the development have left the studio due to constant bullying, and in order to work in this company, you don't even have to be familiar with games. At the same time, the main problem of Minecraft is the lack of one particle mob and a birch forest, which no one was initially going to add, and this was discussed right during Minecon. This is just haven't compared to this studio, and Henrik Nybert, who worked on Generation and Init, who is responsible for account migration, left Mojang. The first highlighted the developer's special passion for their product, so it is unlikely that the studio is somehow involved in their departures. Another thing that is quite common now is the laziness for developers and the fact that they don't interact with the community. I have already mentioned laziness more than once. They cannot do nothing. And if you want to check this, you can read the lists of changes to the snapshots of candidates for release and pre-releases. Of course, brilliant modders will do it faster, but knowledgeable people have long known that it is much easier to create a mod for Minecraft than to add something to the game. Their interaction with the community is probably one of the closest, since on Twitter they constantly ask players for their opinion on certain things. Of course, Mojang is not exactly the smartest studio. There are incomprehensible actions like deleting candles, moving fireflies and the like, but otherwise most of the bad things are associated with Microsoft. The developers never wanted to hunt the players. They play their own games and know very well what it needs. But when you work for other people, you have to find compromise so that both the players are happy having received the content and the corporations haven't received money. This is much better than with the Minecraft movie, where most people don't even know what to film and what the point of the game is. You can find out how Warner Bros. Destroyed the Minecraft movie in the roller in the video that you see on the screen. Well, for now, bye.